Keith Olbermann put out a video the other day outlining what he believes to be Donald Trump's plans for his impending media outlet, Trump TV, that I had never thought about before. He makes some good points here, but I think he's missing the whole picture. But it also relates to another commentary he gave several years ago. I will intersperse both of them, and I will stop to comment every time something occurs to me, and every time I think he could have a more full solution to this impending crisis he outlines, both 6 years ago and the other day. And you'll see how as this video progresses. Take a look.
This is Thursday, November 3rd, 5 days until the 2016 presidential election, and this is the closer.
Finally tonight, as promised, a special comment on the Supreme Court's ruling today in the case Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission.
It is not breaking news. He will do it again today at least once. Donald Trump will attack the media. Did it in Miami yesterday. Said, quote, another important issue for Americans is integrity in journalism. These people are among the most dishonest people I've ever met, spoken to, done business with. These are the most dishonest people. The crowd booed lustily. There has never been anywhere near the media dishonesty like we've seen in this election. Don't worry, they won't spin the cameras and show the kinds of massive crowds. They won't do that.
Today, the Supreme Court of Chief Justice John Roberts, in a decision that might actually have more dire implications than Dred Scott v. Sanford, declared that because of the alchemy of its 19th century predecessors in deciding that corporations had all the rights of people, any restrictions on how these corporate beings spend their money on political advertising are unconstitutional. In short, the First Amendment, free speech for persons, which went into effect in 1791, applies to corporations, which were not recognized as the equivalents of persons until 1886. In short, there are now no checks on the ability of corporations or unions or other giant aggregations of power to decide our elections. None.
But it's also a preview. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was rumored this week to be using personnel recruiters to try to staff up Trump TV, which starts the obvious cognitive dissonance thing echoing again. Trump TV means his family expects him to lose the election, right? Already in the proverbial soft launch on Facebook, it is a cynical exploitation of the last 16 months of relentless Trump self-promotion and reality show plot lines and network enablers and the accumulation of a database of at least 12 million email addresses. But it is based on that one premise. President Trump would have no time for his own political television apparatus, right? What would a president of the United States need his own television network for? What would a president of the United States, elected purely as a cult figure and facing enormous opposition from the very moment of his inauguration, do with his own television network? What would a president of the United States, with no apparent commitment to nor understanding of democracy, with only a stated insistence that, quote, I alone can fix it, what would he put on his own television network?
Good question, Keith. Keith, do you want to help Keith out?
Be prepared for the end of what you're watching now. I don't just mean me or this program or this network. I mean all the independent news organizations and the propagandists like Fox for that matter, because Fox inflames people against the state. And after today's ruling, the corporations will only need a few more years of inflaming people before the message suddenly shifts to everything's great.
And Keith Olbermann probably sees this as a more plausible scenario than he did before. Because
in the new world unveiled this morning by John Roberts, who stops Rupert Murdoch from buying the Associated Press?
But Donald Trump doesn't just want to take control of the Associated Press. He wants to take control of all narrative that the government makes accessible to the public. He wants to take control of anything anyone says about his prospective administration. Because as Keith puts it,
Trump TV is not designed as a fallback in case he loses. Trump TV is designed as a ready-made propaganda outlet in case he wins. Trump TV is not a consolation prize. It is a means of consolidating power once he is in the White House. It might not even remain Trump TV. It might morph into something like official state TV. What?
Now, I don't know if I buy this. He does seem to put on a narrative that Trump is so dangerous and so horrible that we have to vote for Hillary Clinton in response. And Trump will make official state TV the status quo if we don't. But what I take issue with here is that corporations and the states sponsor each other. So things that are outside the acceptable narrative of capitalist America are not going to get a lot of traction. Trump TV, if Trump wins, may have the appearance of being more authoritarian and more oppressive. But that's just because it gets rid of all pretenses of freedom. Here, I don't know if it's a worse kind of damaging, but it's a different kind of damaging to give the public the illusion that they have freedom. This is referenced by journalist Chris Hedges as inverted totalitarianism, giving the public the power to manufacture their willing participants in authoritarian structures. Trump TV would get rid of the inversion and just wipe it all out, presumably. That's what Olbermann is saying. But so would any corporatist, capitalist, American political system, especially after Citizens United and the deregulation of the Telecommunications Act in 1996, before that, if you want to know the truth, signed by Bill Clinton. So the solution here is not just to stop Trump. The solution here is to stop capitalism, to stop concentration of power, which is what capitalism requires, and to resist all efforts to placate the public, which both Trump and Clinton will do, even if Trump is more overt about it.
What more could he ask for? Indeed, what would he need more than a media outlet that always agrees with his indecisions and his whims and his insults, and then demonizes and then organizes action against those who criticize him, and ultimately can be amped up to outshout the unofficial American broadcasters, the disloyal ones like CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN and Fox News?
Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh don't even realize it. Today, John Roberts just cut their throats too. So with critics silenced and bought off, and even the town assessor who lives next door to you elected to office with campaign funds 99.9% drawn from corporate coffers, what are you going to do about it? The internet. The internet. Ask them about the internet in China.
I honestly don't know whether it'll be that difficult to keep media organizations in line. After all, the mainstream corporate press gave Trump close to $2 billion in free media coverage this election cycle. And part of the reason was that Trump was good for ratings. So if the press eventually figure out that agreeing with Trump would be good for their bottom line, maybe more of them will do it. Because the idea of the mainstream press now is that they usually hire people who won't make too big a fuss out of the status quo, because that's good for the bottom line and that doesn't disrupt established power. With Trump being the established power, maybe the media will fall in line then too.
This decision, which in mythology would rank somewhere between the bottomless pit and the opening of Pandora's box, got next to no coverage in the right-wing media today, almost nothing in the middle, and a lot less than necessary on the left. The right wing won't even tell their constituents that they're being sold into bondage alongside the rest of us. Why should they? For them, the start of this will be wonderful.
Conservatives like to think they value autonomy. They don't know that a vision of allowing journalists to take control of their own networks would be the type of organization that would save them. But once they start actually organizing in their own interest, they would be undermining your ideology that they've been told to value so closely for their entire professional careers. So, funny how that works out. Maybe when journalists and media personalities start to actually rock the boat, they'll come over to my side.
What are you going to do about it? Turn to free speech advocates?
If we're loud enough, we can act as our own free speech advocates. Just like the old saying that at the last slaves in feudal times probably killed their master with a pitchfork he made. We could probably go a long way in combating capitalist media using these mechanisms and eventually overturning them.
These were the free speech advocates. The lawyer for that homunculus who filed this suit, David Bossie, the lawyer is Floyd Abrams. Floyd Abrams, who has spent his life defending American freedoms, especially freedom of speech. Apparently, this life was spent this way in order to guarantee that when it really counted, he could help the corporations destroy free speech.
And now we can be. Media has changed so much, even between 2010, and that initial special comment was made, and 2016, when Trump TV commentary was made. Keith Olbermann's views haven't changed. He's using this exact same argument. Again, I think he makes some good points here. He understands what damage Trump can cause. He doesn't understand how to fight it. He doesn't understand that he would be keeping the mechanisms in place by fighting to elect Hillary Clinton. But what he does understand is the threat that capitalist corporate media poses, even if he doesn't understand that that's what threat he's worried about. The consolidation of state and corporate power to combine media forces in that respect is what he's worried about. But that would be a product, a natural consequence of capitalism. But to say capitalism and fascism are unrelated is the same way to say that socialism and communism are unrelated. Fascism is a form of capitalism. Communism is a form of socialism. They're just different. They're just one form of each.
And every nascent operation from the closer to Breitbart TV if they will not toe the line. Hell, why bother out-shouting them for very long?
Because we're right.
Trump has already threatened all the media of this country, all those protected by libel laws, all free speech. He has threatened CNN and the New York Times by name. 9 days ago, his henchman Dan Scavino threatened Megyn Kelly. Watch, he tweeted, "What happens to her after this election is over?" Why would you assume Trump would bother sticking to the laws when he believes, as no president in our history has ever believed, that he can just nullify laws with executive orders? Why not cut to the chase and just announce that you can't broadcast news without a license from the American government, and we will let you know when your license application has been reviewed?
What Olbermann describes as a doomsday scenario is not that different from what happens under corporate capitalism. You can't get seen unless you have an abundance of corporate sponsorships. And we will let you know if your business was approved to be started, whether the corporations will like what you have to say. So speech is already suppressed just because the government says it instead of And when they become one and the same thing, the threat's already there. Again, it'll be more egregious and more visible under Trump. And we'll have to fight the same thing under Clinton. But the difference is that Clinton may be more tactfully effective at suppressing dissent, and Trump will be louder about it and people will fight about it. I do not want Trump to be president. He is horrible. I also do not want Clinton to be president. She didn't earn my vote. I don't agree with her. She is a capitalist. They both are capitalist. Again, Trump is worse, but maybe he won't do and won't be effective in what Keith Olbermann predicts here. I think that we will be able to fight him, and I think we need to fight him, and I don't think we need to give up on letting our voices be heard. We need to keep fighting. He needs to be told no, and not just to the voting, because even if he loses, he'll be a permanent political fixture for years to come. He needs to be told no. People don't subscribe to only what he says. Even the people who voted for him, even the people who tend to be on his side, are not going to actually submit to his whims if they realize that their personal autonomy is under threat. But the only way they do that is by fighting for their own independence. So that's what we need to do.
In the age of satellites and internet, it is doubtful that Trump TV as state TV could totally drown out outside voices, even when the Nazis took over all of German radio in 1934. And then in 1939, they made it a criminal offense to listen to foreign stations. Words of dissent did make it through, but not from within their country. And ask the Chinese or the North Koreans how unfettered their internet is. They are told, and eventually most of them come to actually believe, that in blocking them from seeing half or more of all websites, their governments aren't denying them truth, but protecting them from external brainwashing. Happily, that could never happen here. Not with Trump having demonized the current American media during virtually every one of his speeches like yesterday, to the point where on the 13th of last month at Cincinnati, the motorcade serving the entire traveling campaign corps had to be guarded by police dressed in riot gear. Happily, that could never happen here. Not with Trump having advocated for restrictions on the internet to keep terrorists from communicating or from brainwashing American minds. And then he would decide who's a terrorist. Happily, that could never happen here. Not with Trump's toady Newt Gingrich having gone on record as long ago as 2006 saying that part of the internet needed to be turned off and part of the First Amendment needed to be reconsidered. No. Trump TV is his backup plan, just to cash in on his indisputable popularity with the average American. The average American who believes what Trump tells him, that the rigged media is conspiring against him and conspiring against Trump, who shouts Lugenpress and yells homophobic and racist slurs at the reporters and does so with impunity, who wants to hear that Trump is right and Trump is good and Trump is winning and Trump has gotten them all better jobs and Trump has made America great again and Trump has gotten rid of those filthy immigrants and Trump is happy to raise the chocolate ration to 20 grams a week and Trump has killed the terrorists and Trump alone fixed it and Trump recognizes which group is the next threat and Trump is acting to protect you from it and Trump has good news about the fighting and Trump is right. We have always been at war with East Asia. But no, Trump TV is just his backup plan if he loses. Besides, even if he is elected, and even if he wanted to do this, he couldn't, establish his own Trump TV network and then shut down all the other media in this country. Let me ask you one question. Who would stop him? That's the closer. I'm Keith Olbermann. Watch this space.
Is he going to confiscate our laptops and cell phones too? I don't know how easy it would be for him to stop a mobilized effort to revolt against state and corporate narrative. For him, they're one and the same, but still, what would happen if people just said no? He needs to hear no, and even if he loses, he would still need to hear no, because Trump TV will be incredibly powerful at mobilizing the fascist movement, which is why the anti-fascist movement, it needs to be alive and well. And anti-fascist media and socialist media need to be presented as an opposition that can actually be effective instead of liberal commentary. So I know that Trump is dangerous. I also know that Hillary Clinton is dangerous because she will quietly continue the neoliberal capitalist empire. But I don't think that this is as impossible as Olbermann is forecasting.
What more could he ask for? Indeed, what would he need more than a media outlet that always agrees with his indecisions and his whims and his insults, and then demonizes and then organizes action against those who criticize him, and ultimately can be amped up to outshout the unofficial American broadcasters, the disloyal ones like CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN and Fox News, and every nascent operation from the Closer to Breitbart TV if they will not toe the line.
The media outlets wouldn't have to go. All that would have to go would be the pundits. That's not that different from people getting fired in the past for refusing to toe the corporate line, for refusing to line up with a network's predetermined agenda. They're just fired. That's what happens under capitalism, because people who wouldn't rock the boat are representatives of the capitalist class. What Olbermann is prophesizing is scary for sure, but it is only more overtly terrible than what's happening right now. What's happening right now is a quiet form of authoritarian control that would continue under Clinton, and to some extent that would continue under Trump. Sometimes it would be louder under Trump. It would probably be worse under Trump, but it would also give public the grounds for civil disobedience. Because if anything is grounds for civil disobedience, it's when a government official is acting totally batshit and everyone agrees with it. So it's our turn.
The Republicans, the Conservatives, the Joe Liebermans, the Tea Partiers are in the front aisle at the political prostitution store. They are specially discounted old favorites for their corporate masters. Like the first years of irreversible climate change for the Conservatives, the previously cold winter will grow delightfully warm. Only later will it be hot, then unbearable, then flames. And the Conservatives will burn with the rest of us, and they'll never know what happened.
Hell, why bother outshouting them for very long? Trump has already threatened all the media of this country, all those protected by libel laws, all free speech. He has threatened CNN and the New York Times by name. 9 days ago, his henchman Dan Scavino threatened Megyn Kelly. Watch, he tweeted, what happens to her after this election is over. Why would you assume Trump would bother sticking to the laws when he believes, as no president in our history has ever believed, that he can just nullify laws with executive orders?
This is why it's probably crucial to work with members of the proletariat who have conservative ideology. Because maybe there will be a chance that people who preach the rhetoric of autonomy and independence and against authoritarian power will actually like it if they get at the feeling that that's a possibility for them. People always think that whatever ideology they are for is one of autonomy because the alternative is worse. But what if the alternative they fear so much is what's present now. Conservatives will not know what happened if they get burned by the Trump administration and they get to stop preaching their voices. But they will also need to embrace an ideology which actually emphasizes autonomy and worker control, and they need to be able to say no to authority and begin to build independent relationships with each other, and just to say no to the government rule and the capitalist rule, and just to ignore authoritarian rule and structure and just start over. It's easier said than done. But we need people from all over the political spectrum now to help us, even if there are some disagreements. Being able to do what I want when I want it and having control over my own livelihood is not a hard concept to get behind. People are just afraid that other people will sabotage it. Get enough people on our side. We could stage a legitimate resistance. I know I'm speaking in very broad terms and very dramatic terms now, but it might not be that crazy if thousands or millions of people protest with me, protest with other people who agree with me, protest our individual pet causes to actually bring justice and control to our own lives. It might sound crazy now, it might not be crazy later. But Olbermann is still wondering why we bother to dissent. Take a look.
Why not cut to the chase and just announce that you can't broadcast news without a license from the American government, and we will let you know when your license application has been reviewed?
Right, but what if millions of people just ignore that and start doing shit their own way anyway? When the American Revolutionary soldiers dumped tea into the Boston Harbor and started a revolution, it wasn't legal to revolt against the monarchy. But they did it anyway. Consensus is what makes things acceptable in society, and we need a new social order. So it's going to take a lot of work, but maybe we'll be able to change the minds of people in a significant enough way to actually fight against authoritarian rule like Trump.
In the age of satellites and internet, it is doubtful that Trump TV as state TV could totally drown out outside voices, even when the Nazis took over all of German radio in 1934. And then in 1939, they made it a criminal offense to listen to foreign stations. Words of dissent did make it through, but not from within their country. And ask the Chinese or the North Koreans how unfettered their internet is. They are told, and eventually most of them come to actually believe, that in blocking them from seeing half or more of all websites, their governments aren't denying them truth, but protecting them from external brainwashing.
His argument, translated from self-satisfied legal jargon, is that as a function of the First Amendment, you must allow for the raping and pillaging of the First Amendment by people who can buy the First Amendment.
Good point, Keith. Just like outside voices against capitalism are not totally drowned out from the American discourse. But the fact that they're harder to be seen leads some Americans to believe that the cultural hegemony that they're under protects people from being radicalized to ideologies that are less than desirable in the civilized world. It's a less egregious notion, but nonetheless a similar one.
Happily, that could never happen here.
The point you're making is that it happens if Trump comes to power, but as I explained, a similar phenomenon is already happening. So,
Not with Trump having demonized the current American media during virtually every one of his speeches, like yesterday, to the point where on the 13th of last month at Cincinnati, the motorcade serving the entire traveling campaign corps had to be guarded by police dressed in riot gear. Happily, that could never happen here. Not with Trump having advocated for restrictions on the internet to keep terrorists from communicating or from brainwashing American minds. And then he would decide who's a terrorist. Happily, that could never happen here. Not with Trump's toady Newt Gingrich having gone on record as long ago as 2006 saying that part of the internet needed to be turned off and part of the First Amendment needed to be reconsidered. No. Trump TV is his backup plan, just to cash in on his indisputable popularity with the average American. The average American who believes what Trump tells him, that the rigged media is conspiring against him and conspiring against Trump, who shouts Lugenpress and yells homophobic and racist slurs at the reporters and does so with impunity, who wants to hear that Trump is right and Trump is good and Trump is winning and Trump has gotten them all better jobs and Trump has made America great again and Trump has gotten rid of those filthy immigrants and Trump is happy to raise the chocolate ration to 20 grams a week and Trump has killed the terrorists and Trump alone fixed it and Trump recognizes which group is the next threat and Trump is acting to protect you from it and Trump has good news about the fighting and Trump is right. We have always been at war with East Asia.
Trump didn't cause that mindset. He didn't invent that mindset. He just inflamed it. Again, similar phenomenon already happening under capitalism and with the hatred of the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. It's just louder now. Trump didn't make it come out. He made it louder, and him losing political power isn't going to make that go away.
But no, Trump TV is just his backup plan if he loses. Besides, even if he is elected.
There might yet be ways to work around this, to restrict corporate governance and how corporations make and spend their money. I pointed out that any such legislation, even if it somehow sneaked past this, the last U.S. Senate, not funded by a generous gift from the Chubb Group, would eventually wind up in front of a Supreme Court, and whether or not John Roberts was still at its head would be irrelevant.
Which is why we just should be grateful to perpetuate a less overtly violent and part of the same oppressive system. I don't understand. And I don't know if you were solidly as democratic as you are in 2010 as you are now. I don't know if you would have predicted someone like Trump, but it's distressing to see that you do still seem to maintain capitalism because you're on MSNBC and you never said anything to that effect when you were there, and you never are saying anything to the effect of socialist uprising. Now, you are just telling us to stop Donald Trump. That's not nearly enough, and I think you know it.
Russ Feingold told me today there might yet be ways to work around this, to restrict corporate governance and how corporations make and spend their money. I pointed out that any such legislation, even if it somehow sneaked past this, the last U.S. Senate, not funded by a generous gift from the Chubb Group, would eventually wind up in front of a Supreme Court, and whether or not John Roberts was still at its head would be irrelevant. The next 9 men and women on the Supreme Court will get there not because of their judgment, nor even their politics. They will get there because they were appointed by purchased presidents and confirmed by purchased senators. This is what John Roberts did today.
What he did was allow someone who was his own special interest to be propped up by capitalist media and a corrupt government who kowtows to power against another corrupt government official who was the expected choice, who the public only saw as an inevitable solution. He propped them up. Money made their agendas more at the forefront of the American public's mind. But Citizens United gave way for the election of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I don't know if Olbermann could have foreseen this, but this is a product of capitalism, and he's never fully explicit about that. So, I don't know what's next, but I know that there's still fight left in a radical movement for democracy. And it doesn't end with an election of Hillary Clinton or an election of Donald Trump. It certainly doesn't end. But nothing's hopeless. We still have ourselves. We still have power to exercise ourselves. We still have our own voices, and we still have the ability to advocate for our freedom and our creative expression. Don't give up. Keith Olbermann's not so sure.
I would suggest a revolution, but a revolution against the corporations that make all the guns and the bullets?
Revolutions are scary, I get it, but again, telling us it's hopeless is not really helpful here.
Maybe the corporations, legally defined as human beings, but without the pesky occasional human attributes of conscience and compassion. Maybe when handed the only keys to the electoral machine, they will simply not redesign America in their own corporate image. But let me leave you with this final question. After today, who's going to stop them?
Even if he is elected, and even if he wanted to do this, he couldn't, establish his own Trump TV network and then shut down all the other media in this country. Let me ask you one question. Who would stop him?
Good question, Keith. Since we are the ones who would stand to benefit from a revolt, and we are the ones who need the power to freely express ourselves, that Trump and the decision on Citizens United and people like John Roberts are suppressing, who would be the one to stop them? The masses would be. We would be. This is Democratize the Media. I'm Jeremy Einbinder. And as Keith Olbermann would say,
watch this space.